The small town was quiet that cold evening, the way it always became when the sun began to set behind the distant hills. Most people had already finished their shopping and hurried back to their warm homes. The light wind carried the smell of warm bread from the bakery, but it also carried the uneasy chill that made people walk faster. Outside the old grocery store stood a little girl, around 10 years old, with a thin build and tired eyes. Her name was Lena. She wore an oversized shirt that looked faded, a skirt that had been washed too many times, and no shoes. Her feet were dusty, and her hair was tied back in a small knot that she had probably fixed by herself. She kept watching the door of the store, hoping someone kind would walk out. Almost every person who came out glanced at her for a moment, then quickly looked away, as if unsure what to say. Lena did not blame them. She understood that most people were in a hurry. Sometimes she took a small step toward someone, hoping to ask for food, but her courage slipped away every time they walked past without noticing her fully. She hadn't eaten anything since morning. The hunger inside her was familiar now, not shocking or surprising. It was like a quiet ache she lived with every day. But she wasn't waiting for herself alone. Her younger brother Sam and her baby sister Mila were waiting behind the old railway station, which was about 10 minutes away. She had promised them she would return with something, anything to eat. Her hands trembled slightly as she rubbed them together for warmth. She whispered to herself, "I have to try one more time." She took a slow breath, gathering all her courage again. Just then, a tall man wearing a dusty brown hat stepped out of the grocery store. He had strong shoulders, a simple shirt tucked into worn-out jeans, and boots covered in dry mud. A grocery bag hung from his left hand. He was the kind of man who looked like he belonged to the open fields rather than the noisy town. This was Thomas Hale, a rancher who lived outside the town limits. People respected him, but he was known for being quiet. He usually came to town only when he needed supplies, then returned to his ranch where he lived alone after his wife passed away years ago. Lena watched him walk out, and something in her heart said this might be her chance. He seemed calm, not in a hurry, and his face looked kind even though he didn't smile much. She took a small step forward, then another, her fingers tightly clutching the hem of her skirt. Thomas noticed movement from the corner of his eye and turned lightly. He saw the girl approaching him, her small frame trembling slightly. He stopped walking, unsure what she needed. Her soft voice finally broke the silence. "Mr. Can you spare some bread?" Her words were gentle, almost as if she feared they might break if she spoke too loudly. She did not stretch her hand forward like some kids did. She simply looked up at him with hopeful, tired eyes. For a moment, Thomas stood still, surprised not by the request itself but by the girl's voice, so polite, so careful, as though she did not want to trouble anyone. He had seen children asking for things before, but this felt different. The sincerity in her tone made him feel something shift inside his chest. He knelt down slightly so he could look at her face more clearly. "What's your name, sweetheart?" "Lena," she replied softly. "How long have you been standing here?" he asked, keeping his voice gentle. She hesitated. "Not too long. I just need a little bread, for my brother and sister." Thomas's eyebrows rose a bit. "You have siblings?" "Yes," she nodded, quickly wiping her nose with her sleeve. "Sam is 7. Mila is 4. She said their ages with a kind of pride, like she was responsible for them, even though she was still a child herself. Thomas looked at her thin arms, her cold fingers, and the small scratches on her feet. He also noticed that she kept glancing toward the road that led to the railway station. She seemed worried, as if time was running out. "Are they waiting nearby?" he asked. She nodded again. "They're waiting behind the old station. I told them I would bring food." Something in her expression touched Thomas deeply. He had always been a strong man, but he was not heartless. He remembered how his wife used to say, "Thomas, kindness doesn't cost anything." He still carried her words in his heart, even years after she was gone. He stood up slowly. "Come with me," he said. "Let's get you something warm to eat." Lena blinked in surprise, as if she could not believe her luck. She followed him back into the grocery store quietly, keeping her hands close to her chest. Inside, The warm air from the heaters felt like a blessing. She stood near the door, unsure if she was allowed to walk farther. Thomas picked up a fresh loaf of bread, a bottle of warm milk kept in a small, heated container, and a few bananas. He glanced at her and asked, "Anything your brother or sister really likes?" Her face brightened for the first time. "Sam loves bananas. And Mila likes milk." "Then we'll take these," he said, placing everything gently into the basket. The woman at the counter watched them with curious eyes but said nothing. She had seen the girl outside many times but never saw anyone bring her in before. When Thomas paid for the food and handed the warm milk to Lena, she held it carefully, almost protectively. The warmth seemed to travel through her hands, giving her comfort. She looked up at him with gratitude she could not put into words. "Thank you," she whispered. Thomas nodded. "Let's get this to your siblings." They stepped out into the cold evening again. As they walked toward the railway station, Thomas noticed how Lena kept taking quick steps, eager to reach her brother and sister. He slowed his pace slightly so she could walk comfortably beside him. "How long have you three been on your own?" he asked gently. She hesitated, then said, "A few months. After Mama and Papa got sick." Thomas did not push her to explain more. He could see from her face that the memories were painful. Instead, he simply matched her pace and listened when she wanted to speak. "We move around a lot," she continued quietly. "Sometimes people let us stay in old buildings or behind shops, but we don't bother anyone. I just try to find food for Sam and Mila." Thomas felt a heaviness in his chest. He wondered how such young children managed to survive alone. The thought made him feel both sad and protective. As they reached the old railway station, he noticed how broken and abandoned it looked. The paint was peeling from the walls, and the roof above the waiting area had holes in it. Under one of the broken shelters sat two small children. The boy, Sam, was hugging his younger sister, trying to keep her warm. The moment Sam saw Lena, he stood up quickly. "Lena, you're back." Mila lifted her head and smiled faintly, her cheeks red from the cold. When they saw the food in her hands, their eyes lit up. Lena handed the bananas to Sam and the warm milk to Mila. Both children held the food as if they had received treasures. Thomas stood quietly, watching the siblings interact. He saw how Lena guided them gently, how Sam looked up to her, and how Mila clung to her for comfort. They trusted her completely, even though she was just a child herself. Thomas stepped forward a little, giving them a warm, calm smile. "Hello there," he said softly so he wouldn't startle them. "I'm Thomas. Your sister told me about you." Sam looked at Lena, then back at Thomas, unsure but curious. Mila simply hid her face against Lena's side. Lena introduced them softly. "This is Sam. And this is Mila." Thomas nodded kindly. "Nice to meet both of you." He watched them eat, slowly and carefully, as if afraid the food might disappear. His heart felt heavy and warm at the same time. Something deep inside him stirred something he hadn't felt in years. He realized these children had nobody else. They were tired, hungry, and alone in a world too big for them. As he looked at their innocent faces, he felt a clear thought rise inside him, stronger than anything he had felt in a long time. These children needed someone. They needed safety. They needed a home. He stayed with them until they finished eating, talking gently and learning small details about their lives. The more he listened, the more he felt a quiet decision forming in his heart, one that would soon change everything for the children and for him. And as the cold evening slowly turned into night, Thomas knew he could not simply walk away. Not this time. Not from them. Thomas stayed with the children for a while near the broken railway station, letting them eat quietly. The cold evening air grew sharper, but the little ones barely noticed. They were too focused on the warm food they had received. Sam sat close to Lena, holding his banana carefully, taking small bites so it would last longer. Mila sat on Lena's lap, sipping the warm milk slowly, with both hands wrapped around the bottle. Her cheeks softened as the warmth spread through her tiny body. Thomas watched them with a thoughtful expression. He had seen hardship before, but something about these three children standing together with such silent strength touched him deeply. They had gone through so much, and yet they remained gentle, polite, and calm. Many adults would have lost hope long ago, but these young siblings held on to each other. Lena lifted her head and looked at Thomas with quiet gratitude. "Thank you for helping us," she said softly. Thomas nodded. "I'm glad I could." He wanted to ask many questions, but he didn't want to make them uncomfortable. So he waited until they finished eating. When Sam finally finished his banana, he wiped his hands on his shirt and looked up at Thomas with curious eyes. "Are you a rancher?" he asked. Thomas smiled a little. "Yes, I am. I live on a ranch a few miles outside town." Sam's eyes brightened. "Do you have horses?" "I do," Thomas replied. "I have 5. Lena smiled faintly. "Sam loves horses. He always says he wants to see one someday." Thomas glanced at Sam, whose face carried a mix of excitement and shyness. "Well," Thomas said kindly, "maybe one day you all can visit." Sam nodded slowly, as if imagining it already. Mila, who had finished her milk, leaned her head on Lena's shoulder and began to fall asleep. Her soft breathing was the only sound for a moment. Thomas noticed how carefully Lena held her, as if she were both an older sister and a mother at the same time. Thomas finally knelt down near them so he could talk to them more comfortably. "Kids," he began gently, "I'm not trying to interfere, but how long have you been staying here?" Lena hesitated, but Thomas's calm voice made her feel safe enough to speak. "We came here a few days ago," she said. "We thought maybe we could find someone who would help us find work or food. We tried to stay behind shops or in places where we wouldn't bother anyone." "And before this town?" Thomas asked softly. "We were in another town," Lena answered. "But people told us it was too dangerous to stay outside. So we moved again. We keep moving until we find a place that feels safe." Thomas's heart tightened. "Where were you staying before your parents?" "Before things changed? In the small farmhouse our parents rented," she replied, looking down at her hands. "It wasn't ours, but it was home. When Mama and Papa got sick, we took care of each other as much as we could, but after they were gone, we had to leave. There was no way to stay. So, we tried to find a new place." Her voice grew smaller with each sentence. Thomas lowered his head slightly, taking in their reality. These children had been wandering without comfort, support, or guidance. They had no home, no family, no one to rely on except each other. Sam, noticing Lena's quiet sadness, placed his hand on her arm. "We're okay," he whispered to her. "We have each other. Sam, we have each other. 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 We have." Those words struck Thomas deeply. Children who should have been in school, playing, laughing, learning were instead surviving day by day. They didn't complain or ask for more. They simply accepted their situation and moved forward. Their strength humbled him. "What about the people in the town?" Thomas asked gently. "Has anyone spoken to you?" Lena nodded slowly. "Some people gave us old blankets or leftovers, but they were busy. They said someone would come to help us, but no one came." Thomas knew the truth behind that. In small towns, people often expected someone else to step in, maybe out of fear, or confusion, or responsibility they didn't want to take on. It wasn't unkindness, it was uncertainty. Lena looked at him carefully. "We don't want to trouble anyone. We just need a safe place for a few days." Thomas thought about that. His ranch was a quiet place. He lived alone. He had plenty of space. And though he had grown used to solitude, he also knew loneliness better than anyone. His wife had always wanted children, and they had dreamed of adopting someday. But life had taken a different path. As Thomas watched the 3 siblings huddled together, he felt his heart soften more than it had in years. "Kids," he said slowly, "I'm going to ask you something. And I want you to answer honestly." He paused. making sure they were listening. "Would you come with me tonight? To my ranch? I have a warm house, extra rooms, plenty of food, and it's safe." Lena looked startled. She held Mila a little tighter. "Go with you? To your ranch?" "Yes," Thomas said gently. "Only if you feel comfortable. I won't force you. But you can rest there, eat well, and stay warm. At least for tonight." Sam looked at Lena, his eyes filled with hope. The idea of a warm place, maybe even seeing horses, made his heart beat fast. Mila slept peacefully, unaware of the conversation. Lena's eyes filled with confusion, hope, and caution all at once. "Why would you help us this much?" she asked quietly. "You don't even know us." Thomas gave a soft smile. "You're children who need help. And I'm someone who can help. That's enough reason." For a moment, Lena did not speak. She looked at her younger siblings, then back at Thomas. A gentle wind blew through the broken shelter, making her shiver again. She realized she couldn't keep them outside in the cold. They had stayed in too many unsafe places already. Finally, Lena nodded. "If it's really okay." "Yes. We'll come." Thomas felt a warm relief inside. "It's more than okay." Sam stood up quickly, his face brighter than it had been in months. "Are we going now?" Thomas chuckled softly. "In a few minutes. Let's get everything ready." He helped Lena wrap Mila in the blanket she had brought. The little girl woke up briefly, but fell back asleep as soon as Lena held her close. Thomas carried their small bag, barely more than a cloth, with a few items inside. It felt too light to belong to 3 children. They had almost nothing. As they walked through the quiet town together, Thomas walked beside them protectively, making sure Lena didn't have to carry Mila the whole way. He gently lifted the sleeping child into his own arms, where she rested comfortably. Lena watched with relief. Sam walked beside Thomas, staying surprisingly close, as though afraid the rancher might disappear. The streetlights glowed softly, casting long shadows behind them. The town was quiet, shops closed, windows lit from inside, where families were sharing dinner. The children stayed silent, taking in the peaceful walk. They weren't used to walking with an adult who made them feel safe. When they reached Thomas's truck, Sam's eyes widened. "We're going in that?" "Yes," Thomas said with a small smile. "Hop in. It's warm inside." Lena climbed into the truck first, then helped Sam climb. Thomas carefully placed Mila in the back seat beside them and buckled her gently so she wouldn't fall. Lena watched every move he made, as if memorizing the kind way he handled her siblings. Once everyone was settled, Thomas started the engine. The heater filled the truck with warm air, and Sam sighed happily, leaning against the seat. Lena took Mila's hand, brushing her small fingers gently. Thomas glanced back at them through the mirror. "You're safe now," he said softly. The children didn't respond with words, but their quiet, peaceful faces said everything. The truck rolled out of the town and headed toward the open road leading to Thomas's ranch. The sky above was dark, sprinkled with stars, and the fields stretched endlessly around them. The night felt calm for the first time in months. The children felt that they might finally rest without fear. And as Thomas continued driving, he knew deep inside that bringing them along was not just a simple act of kindness. It was the beginning of something much bigger, something that would change all of their lives. The road to the ranch felt long and peaceful, with only the soft hum of the truck engine filling the quiet night. The sky above was sprinkled with stars, shining clearly in the open countryside. For Lena, Sam, and little Mila, this drive felt like stepping into another world, calm, safe, and strangely comforting. Each mile took them farther away from the cold streets and closer to something they had never imagined for themselves. Mila slept soundly, her small head resting against Lena's arm. Sam sat near the window, watching the moving fields with wide eyes. He looked amazed at every stretch of open land, every hill, every tree that passed by. Lena sat silently between them, holding both their hands. Her heart was beating fast, not out of fear, but because she didn't know what waited ahead. She hoped with all her heart that this kindness was real and not temporary like so many things had been for them. Thomas glanced at them from time to time through the rear-view mirror. He saw the peacefulness spreading on their faces. It made him feel something he hadn't felt for a long time. A quiet sense of purpose. After nearly 20 minutes, the truck turned onto a narrow dirt road. A wooden arch stood at the entrance with a carved sign that read, Hale Ranch. The faint light from the porch lantern made the place look warm and welcoming. The house was a single-story structure, with a long porch, surrounded by open fields, and a few barns in the distance. The night air here felt cleaner, calmer. Thomas parked the truck in front of the house. "Here we are," he said softly. Lena looked around with wide eyes. She had seen houses before, but something about this place seemed special. Maybe it was the quietness. Maybe it was the warm light from the porch. Maybe it was the way Thomas stood beside them as if he truly wanted them there. Thomas walked around the truck and carefully lifted the sleeping Mila into his arms. She didn't wake, only cuddled closer to his chest. Lena and Sam followed him up the steps. The wooden porch creaked softly under their feet. When Thomas opened the front door, a gentle warmth greeted them. The living room was cozy, with soft yellow lights and a fireplace glowing in the corner. A soft rug lay near the fire, and the faint smell of pine wood filled the air. On the walls were pictures of horses, open landscapes, and a few photographs of Thomas with a woman who had kind eyes, his late wife. Sam whispered. "It's so warm." Lena nodded slowly, feeling her shoulders relax for the first time in months. Thomas placed Mila gently on the couch and covered her with a blanket. She let out a tiny sigh in her sleep, turning slightly, then settled again comfortably. "You kids must be cold and tired," Thomas said gently. "I'll get you some warm soup." He walked into the kitchen, and soon the sound of pots and spoons echoed softly. Lena stood there quietly, not sure if she should sit or help. Sam wandered toward the fireplace, his eyes shining with curiosity. "You can sit, sweetheart," Thomas called from the kitchen when he noticed Lena still standing. "This is your home tonight. Make yourselves comfortable." Lena slowly sat on the sofa next to Mila, brushing her sister's hair away from her face. Sam sat on the rug near the fire, rubbing his hands to warm them. After a few minutes, Thomas returned with 3 bowls of soup and fresh bread. He placed them gently on the table. "Eat slowly," he said. "It's hot." The children didn't need another invitation. They began to eat, taking careful sips of the warm soup that felt like comfort flowing through their bodies. The bread was soft, fresh, and far better than anything they had eaten in a long time. Sam closed his eyes for a moment, enjoying the warmth. "This is very good," he whispered. Thomas smiled. "I'm glad you like it." After eating, the children felt sleepy. Their bodies had gone through so much exhaustion that the warmth of the house made them relax completely. "Come," Thomas said. "Let me show you your rooms." Sam stood up eagerly. Lena lifted Mila, who was half asleep but calm. Thomas led them down a short hallway. There were 2 extra rooms on the left side of the hall. "This one is for the girls," Thomas said, opening the first door. Inside was a small but cozy room with 2 beds, soft blankets, and a little window that looked out onto the field. "And this one is for Sam," he said, opening the next room. Sam's room was simple too, with a small bed and a wooden dresser. Lena placed Mila on one of the beds and covered her carefully. The room felt safe enough that Lena finally let herself breathe. "Are you sure it's okay for us to stay here?" she asked in a small voice. "Of course it is," Thomas replied. "You can stay as long as you need." Lena's eyes softened. "Thank you for everything." Thomas gave a gentle nod. "Get some rest now. Tomorrow will be a new day." He turned off the main lights, leaving only the hallway lamp on so they wouldn't feel scared in the dark. Sam pulled the blanket over himself and lay down, smiling faintly. Lena sat beside Mila's bed for a moment, watching her sister sleep peacefully. Then she moved to her own bed, feeling a soft mattress under her for the first time in months. As the children drifted into sleep, Thomas stood quietly at the end of the hallway, watching their doors with a thoughtful expression. He felt something warm settle inside him, a sense that this house, once too quiet, had gained new life. The next morning came gently. Sunlight streamed through the windows, filling the house with a soft glow. Birds chirped outside, and the smell of fresh air slipped in through the small cracks in the window frames. Sam woke first. He blinked, confused for a moment about where he was, then remembered everything. He jumped out of bed and ran to the window. When he pulled the curtains aside, he gasped. Outside, in the open field, stood 5 horses grazing peacefully. He hurried to wake Lena. "Lena, horses. Lots of them." Lena rubbed her eyes and walked to the window. Her mouth opened slightly in surprise. "Wow." Mila woke next, stretching her tiny arms. She sat up, blinking at the sunlight. When she saw Lena smiling, she smiled too. They walked out of the room quietly, still amazed by everything. Thomas was already in the kitchen making breakfast. He looked up when he heard their footsteps. "Good morning," he said warmly. "Good morning," the children replied together. "I made pancakes," Thomas said. "I hope you like them." The children looked delighted. They sat around the small kitchen table, giggling softly as they tried the sweet pancakes. Mila clapped her hands happily after her first bite. After breakfast, Thomas took them outside. The fresh air felt cool but gentle. The horses lifted their heads when they saw Thomas, and Sam ran behind him excitedly. "Can I touch them?" Sam asked, his voice full of excitement. "Of course," Thomas said. "They're friendly. Just move slowly." Sam reached out carefully, touching the soft nose of the brown horse. His eyes sparkled with pure joy. Lena watched with a smile, holding Mila's hand as she played with the grass. Thomas introduced each horse by name. The children listened with curiosity, forming an instant connection with the animals. It was the first time they felt such closeness to something peaceful. Hours passed gently. Sam helped Thomas feed the horses. Lena offered to help with small chores like setting the table or sweeping the porch. Mila followed Thomas everywhere, holding onto his finger, trusting him completely. As days turned into weeks, the ranch no longer felt like a stranger's place. It started feeling like a home. The children learned routines, morning chores, warm meals, calm evenings near the fireplace. They laughed more, slept peacefully, and slowly began healing from the exhaustion of their past. And Thomas, who had lived in silence for so long, found his days brighter. The sound of small footsteps running through the porch, cheerful voices asking questions, and gentle laughter in the house filled the emptiness he had lived with for years. One evening, as the orange sunset painted the fields, Thomas stood on the porch watching the children chase each other gently in the yard. Lena stood near him, smiling at the scene. "They look happy," she said quietly. "They are," Thomas replied. "And so am I." Lena looked at him with grateful eyes. "Thank you for giving us a place." Thomas shook his head softly. "You didn't take anything from me. You brought life back into this home." As the evening breeze passed through the fields, the ranch felt like a place not just for work, but for healing, warmth, and new beginnings. The children, once scared and alone, now felt hope growing inside them, hope for a future they never imagined. And Thomas felt something precious returning to him, the feeling of family. The morning sun was rising slowly over the wide ranch fields, painting everything in soft gold, and the house felt unusually peaceful. Lily woke up earlier than anyone else, as she often did now. She had developed a habit of checking every corner of the home before the day began, making sure everything was in order. It was her way of feeling responsible, her way of showing that she valued the place that had become her safe world. Today she stepped into the living room quietly, hearing the soft crackling of the fire still burning from last night. She smiled a little, knowing Mr. Clayton must have kept it going for the younger children, so they wouldn't feel cold. The house, which once felt too large and too empty, now felt full of small footsteps, soft laughter, and soft whispering voices that were still getting used to the idea that they belonged somewhere. Lily touched the back of one of the chairs, remembering her first night here, when she didn't know whether she should sit or stand. Today, she didn't think twice. She simply moved around as if she had always lived here. She walked toward the porch where Mr. Clayton usually stood at this hour, watching the horses or checking the sky for signs of rain. But when she stepped outside, he was not there. The rocking chair he loved was still, and the small mug he usually carried hadn't been touched. She looked around, confused but not worried. She had learned that he woke up early and moved around the ranch almost silently, doing small tasks before the children woke. Perhaps he was checking the horses or fixing something in the barn. Lily stepped down from the porch and looked out over the spreading land. The morning breeze touched her face lightly, carrying the smell of hay and warm earth. She felt something wonderful, something like belonging. For a long time, she didn't know what that feeling meant. But after a month in this home, she began to understand that the warmth she felt inside was something she had craved for years. When she walked toward the barn, she saw him finally, standing by the fence and feeding one of the older horses. The way he stroked its neck gently showed exactly the kind of man he was. He did everything with care, without expecting anything back. Lily watched him quietly for a few seconds, thinking about how much her life had changed since the day she asked him for bread. She walked closer and stood beside him. He looked at her with his usual calm smile. "You're up early," he said. She nodded. "I wanted to help." "Oh." He handed her a small brush. "Then you can help me with Daisy." She started brushing the horse gently while he continued feeding it. It was a simple moment, but to Lily, it felt special. Moments like this had become the new rhythm of her life, working, helping, learning, feeling part of something. She had never had such moments before. After they finished with the horses, she followed him back to the house. The younger children were awake now, their soft voices filling the rooms. One of the girls, Mia, ran toward Lily and hugged her tightly. Mia had been the one who struggled the most in the beginning. She used to hide behind furniture and avoided speaking. Now she smiled easily, especially at Lily. Lily picked her up and walked toward the kitchen. The warmth of breakfast smells filled the air. Fresh bread in the oven, eggs cooking on the stove, and warm milk heating in a pot. Sarah, the kind neighbor who visited almost every morning, was helping again. She looked up and smiled at the sight of the children gathering around. "I see everyone is hungry already," she said in her cheerful voice. Mr. Clayton walked in behind them, nodding and greeting. Every time Sarah came, she brought a little extra kindness with her, and the house felt even warmer. The children sat around the table, waiting patiently as she served them. Lily watched Mia carefully, making sure she ate properly. She had taken on a caretaker role without anyone assigning it to her. It came naturally. After breakfast, the day went on with its usual pattern. The children had small tasks around the ranch, feeding the chickens, picking vegetables from the small garden, or helping to sweep the porch. Nothing was too difficult, but everything gave them a sense of purpose. They were not just guests here. They were part of the life that happened on the ranch. One of the little boys, Sam, tugged at Lily's sleeve, asking her to play outside. Before, Sam used to sit quietly in the corner, holding an old stuffed toy and refusing to interact with anyone. But now he laughed more, asked questions, and often ran around the yard with the other children. Lily was proud of how much he had changed. They went outside, and soon all the children were playing tag under her supervision. Their laughter echoed across the open field, light and free. Mr. Clayton watched from the porch, a peaceful expression on his face. He often found himself stopping to take in moments like this. He had lived many years on this ranch alone, never imagining that it would one day be filled with children who would change his entire world. When the afternoon sun reached its highest point, they all rested under a large tree. Lily sat with the children leaning against her, exhausted from playing. She looked at the sky and thought about something she had been keeping inside for a while. She wanted to tell Mr. Clayton how grateful she was, but she didn't know how to put it into words. She had tried once, but her voice had shaken. Instead, she tried to show it through her actions. Later that day, as the warm afternoon slowly turned into a cool evening, Sarah returned to the ranch with bags of supplies. She had grown attached to the children too, and she often helped in any way she could. She brought clothes, books, and sometimes simple toys. The children always lit up with joy when she arrived. She helped Lily sort the items in the living room. Lily folded each piece of clothing carefully, making neat stacks. She had learned to appreciate small things: clean clothes, warm blankets, a roof that didn't leak. These things felt like treasures to her. While they worked, Sarah looked at her thoughtfully. "You've grown a lot in such a short time," she said gently. Lily looked up, unsure how to respond. "You take care of everyone," Sarah continued. "You help without being asked. And you smile so much more now." Lily lowered her head slightly, embarrassed but touched. "I just want to be useful," she said softly. "You're more than useful," Sarah replied. "You're special." Those words stayed with Lily long after Sarah left. She had heard many harsh things in her life before coming here, but kind words were rare and precious. She repeated them in her mind, letting them warm her heart. As the evening settled in, Mr. Clayton gathered all the children in the living room. Today was a special day. He had bought a small lantern for each child. They were simple lanterns, but to the children, they looked magical. He told them they could use them for nighttime reading, or when they felt scared in the dark. The children held them carefully, their eyes shining with wonder. Then he cleared his throat, looking at Lily. "I have something for you too," he said. She glanced at him with surprise. He handed her a small notebook and a pencil. The cover was soft brown, and the pages were blank. "You like to think a lot," he said with a warm smile. "Maybe you can write your thoughts here, or draw, or write anything you want." "Thanks." Lily held the notebook close to her chest. No one had ever given her something meant only for her. Her eyes grew warm, but she blinked quickly so the younger children wouldn't notice. "Thank you," she whispered. That night, after the children were asleep, she sat on her bed with the notebook open on her lap. She wrote only a few words, simple ones, but they carried deep meaning. "Today I felt like I truly belong." She closed the notebook gently and looked around her room. The soft glow of her lantern made everything look peaceful. Outside, she heard the sound of the horses settling in the barn and the gentle wind brushing against the windows. The ranch felt like a home she never knew she needed. A place where she could grow, laugh, and learn. A place where every child felt safe. And a place where one kind-hearted rancher, simply by saying yes to a hungry girl on the street, changed many lives, including his own. Lily lay down, closing her eyes with a soft smile. Tomorrow would bring new moments, new laughter, and new memories. She wasn't afraid of the future anymore. She had a family now, and she never had to ask for bread again.